We are going to start paper 1 part B. That is basically the major term is human geography. Right? Now in the broader perspective, first we'll try to differentiate between physical geography and human geography. How it is different, how human geography is different from physical geography. Any idea?
So application part, which is more connected to human beings, their eating habits, their living style, their habitation pattern, all that depends on physical geography can be attributed to human geography.
So let's say talk about the dietary habit. Right. So that's a part of geography or that's a part of anthropology?
It's not audible.
Sorry?
It's not audible.
Okay. You can come on the front side.
How geography is affecting dietary habits, that will come under human geography.
That will come under
Human geography.
human geography, right? And if you look at physical geography, that is primarily about the physical features. Right. So when you talk about physical features, that is the land force, that's the climatic aspects and several other aspects related to physical geography. And human geography, how obviously humans have occupied this space. While writing an answer, you must have clarity over it. Can we really separate it? In the present context, no. But in the past?
Separate.
It can separate. Is it possible to separate it in the present context also? No? So how Antarctica is being influenced by humans? Or how Antarctic influences the human?
By the formation of polar fronts, and that directly or indirectly affects the onset of monsoon.
So when we understand, let's say, global air circulation, atmospheric circulation, then humans can't be separated from that.
These both are very intimately related to each other, both affects each other.
Like whatever is happening on Antarctica may affect equatorial region also.
Melting of ice in Antarctica will lead to sea level rise, which will affect.
So obviously it will affect it. So that's a modern concept. Now just imagine geography in 15th century. Imagine geography in 5th century.
That time it was only finding sea routes and land area. That's it.
Right? There is a very interesting story about the evolution of geographical thought or geography as a discipline. There are a good number of students from different disciplines and sitting in a seminar. So one called that when the introduction took place, so I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm a philosopher, I'm a historian. One guy told I'm a geography. So everybody was explaining. So when said that I'm from geography background. Oh, you mean to say that the names and places. Right. So obviously it hurts the ego. Names and places. So what is geography all about? First we need to understand what is geography, what geographers are supposed to deal with. Is it purely the names and places or it is far more than that? Far more than that? Obviously that's we have already discussed and you must have experienced so many things. For example, settlement pattern. Settlement pattern has its influence of physical aspects, right? When you go for planning, let's say economy, so resource distribution itself is affected by geographical factors. Even if we exclude geography as a part of integral part of humans, physical factors will have its impact on economic factors. Physical factors will have its impact on social factors. right? So that way geography becomes a multifarious subject, and you derive information or content from different sources, and the moment we derive content from different sources, it becomes complex, and the complexity is continuously increasing. When we talk about human geography, actually here we deal about the man-environment relationship. Right? Now, what is the role of a geographer? For example, if we are purely talking about man, let's say evolution of races. So that becomes an integral part of anthropology. Right? When you talk about any other, let's say suppose if we are talking about industrial activities, that becomes a part of economy. Right? Whether it is global economy or microeconomic pattern, that's a different issue. What is the role of geographer? That in the relationship, man-environment relationship, whether man is active one, is an active agent, is a passive or neutral agent, or is a combination of both. Right? That has been debated. Right? Man as an active agent or passive agent is basically what you call determinism, the philosophy of determinism. That means environmental aspects controls human behavior or human activities. That is passive. Man is not that active. Is it true, false, or partly true, partly false, can be debated. Right? For example, the people of ancient time, again let's say talk about our Indus Valley civilization, or if you're talking about Greek civilization, the people must have been in much harmony with the nature, and nature would have been far, far dominant as far as the human activities are concerned. But if you see the 20th century or 21st century humans, they are far more active. Right? Right now we have reaches up till the polar region. We have made much economic progress even in the desert areas. We have started exploiting resources from the ocean bed which were not even known to the ancient people, except the ocean water as a route of trade. There is no utilization of oceans. Right? So man-environment relationship, if you see, that is a very dynamic entity, very, very dynamic, and has evolved through ages to reach the present level. Hence, it is very complex. This complexity is going to increase further. So what is the role of the geographers? To reduce that. Right? So basic role of geographer here is to reduce, explain through interrelationship and intrarelationship of various elements. Now in that question, first comes whether environment again is an active one, is a passive one, or both, or a mix of both. So if the present human-environment relationship, if you see, is it really active or passive or both? Both, right? In the past it would have been active. Environment was active. Man was passive, relatively. But gradually in the medieval period, and then later on environment was active, men were also becoming active. In the later phases of, let's say, 18th, 19th and 20th century, men were far more active, environment were really considered as relatively passive, right? Because you can create every counter element, whatever environmental restraints are there, right? So that's where when you say it is active, it becomes possibilist. The theory of possibilism, the philosophy of possibilism. When it is both, that becomes a very good example is stop and go determinism. That is, we can say neo-determinism also. For the understanding, proper understanding of man-environment relationship, first we should learn, obviously, what is man. Hope we all know that. When we say man, that's humans right now. Now, when we talk about environment, what is environment itself? What is environment? Surroundings. Whatever surrounds you. So it's basically the relationship between man and the space and the region where they are living, right? So if you look at the environmental aspect, whether environment is objective or subjective environment, that is a real environment or perceptual environment, right? So visible reality of the geographical features, is it simply a visible reality of geographical features or the way those features are perceived? So human behavior is dependent upon perceptual environment or real environment? Perceptual environment or real environment? Real environment. Let's say, suppose the distance. Distance is a reality. Physical distance between two places is a reality, right? So let's say, suppose a distance of 1000 kilometers. Now there is a very interesting part how geography is different from that. What is the nearest distance between 2 points in science? A straight line. That is all the fact engineers, right? What is the nearest distance between two places on the surface of the earth for a geographer? Yes, it will always be a curve, right? So in this space, it is true that the nearest distance between 2 points will be a straight line, but on the surface it will always be a curve, right? Because if you draw a straight line between 2 points, you have to pass through the earth, inside the earth, because earth is curvature. So whatever small curvature is there, so for geographers, this is the perspective I am talking about. For geographers, the nearest distance between 2 points is not a straight line, rather it is a curve, right? Which science will deny it, right? But for geographers it's true. So let's say suppose if you're talking about the physical distance of 1000 kilometer, that remains a physical reality for every society. Right? Imagine the physical distance of 1000 kilometer for a tribal society, an American society, Indian society, the poor people, let's say suppose a labor, an Ambani. So distance of 1000 kilometer for Ambani is just kind of having a cup of tea, right? For a labor class, it may need maybe 1 year planning, even if they are going with the public transportation, which is relatively well developed in the present day world, right? 1000 kilometer distance in medieval period and 1000 kilometer distance in ancient period, right? So it is basically the perceptual environment which dominates. Now in this sense we cannot deny the role of real environment. That's where we have conflicting ideas, that's where we have different perceptions, and that's why we have different thought. When we talk about from geographical perspective, that's why we have different ideas, and that's how each idea, howsoever conflicting, howsoever with maybe full of flaw, may be there, but it has its own contribution in its own way in the evolution of a subject, in better understanding of man-environment relationship. So when you start your answer, that aspect must be there. Right? If you look at the role of this area, very, very difficult to prepare. Right? Because we have very vague way of presentation of this paper, especially paper 1 part B. Even if you look at settlement, if you look at models and theories, if you look at economic geography, primarily perspective in geography, it is not very well understood. For example, if you read radicalism, and if you have question on radicalism, and if you are not mentioning about the Naxalite movement, your answer is incomplete. And no book will tell you about Naxalite movement. When you are talking about behavioralism, and if you are not talking about geopolitics, that means you have not understood the term. If you are talking about dualism and dichotomy, now dualism and dichotomy, you read 100 books, they will give you 5 dualism and dichotomy. That means you have not understood the term or the topic as a would-be IS officer, because academician will look geography from a different perspective. An IS officer, would-be IS officer, is supposed to see geography, or for that matter any subject, in his or her own perspective, which is required, which is the need for a would-be IS officer, and that will make your answer different from the college going writers. Right? So that dominates the approaches of understanding of man-environment relationship. Without completely denying the role of real world. Now, what should be the approaches? Let's say suppose if you are assigned a task to explain the man-environment relationship, what are you supposed to do? Let's say whether man is active, if active, up to what extent man is active, if environment is active, up to what extent it is active, right? How would you approach? What will be the approach? How would you learn that?
Taking an example.
Let's say take example, for example,
Coastal regions.
Coastal regions. Okay, go ahead.
In the month of monsoon,
Sorry?
in the month of monsoon, coastal regions, the weather is not very extreme most of the time, so the trading is closed
Or relatively less.
relatively less.
So the climate is active or man is active?
Climate is active.
Climate is
Active.
active or influencing.
Influencing.
So it completely stops the activities in that area? No? Right? Even in the harshest climate, we do have activities going on. Right? So basically, there are two approaches, and that has been the debate, and most of the topics will be basically the crux or just offshoots of these two approaches. First is what you call regional approach. Like for example, if we have areal differentiation, say regional synthesis, the system analysis, right? So there are different approaches. So either regional approaches and systematic approach. To learn man-environment relationship. And throughout the evolution of geographical thought, these two approaches has dominated. And the debates have been on whether regional approach, how far regional approach, a combination of systematic and regional, is it possible to combine that, has been going on, and you will have several geographers which would be backing one or rejecting others, which might be, one might be backing the second one and rejecting the first one. What do you mean by regional approach? Regional approach, when you divide Earth part by part and study the man-environment relationship, it is called regional approach. For example, the most important one is Vidal de la Blache, a French geographer who for the first time tried to talk about pays. Pays is a term in French that means a segment of Earth. It doesn't mean that he was the founder. Right. For example, compage was the term used by Whittlesey. He talks about sequent occupants. The same, but compage is basically a region. When normal aspect apart from that, when he introduced ecological aspects. Like for example, when you read geographically or deal a question like why Delhi is more polluted than the other metropolitan cities of our country. So it is pollution. Pollution is basically ecological aspect, right? The moment you talk about the pollution of Delhi, which is slightly higher as compared to 3 metropolitan cities, that means you will be talking about the location. Delhi is located in the interior of the country, whereas the rest of the 3 metropolitan cities are located in coastal areas. You are talking about geography. When you talk about in the interior location, the rate of weathering and erosion is slightly higher because of temperature contrast or higher range of temperature, right? So the dust particles and all will be higher. So you are talking about geography. The pollution level is exclusively an aspect of ecology, right? But if you look at the human activities, since we are more associated with real estate, so real estate is like when very general statement will be real estate के वजह से pollution दिल्ली में ज़्यादा होता है. Can't we see the same growth of real estate in other metropolitan cities? They are growing in that cities also. What Kolkata was in the 50 years back, it is not right now the same. The same is true about Mumbai and Chennai. Delhi is also growing, so all the other cities also growing. As far as the building are concerned, you have good number of skyscrapers in all the metropolitan cities. Why Delhi is more polluted? Let's say when you talk about the condition of women in Delhi as compared to the rest of the metropolitan cities, right? That is purely anthropogenic aspect, that is social aspect. That's mainly you deal in sociology. But a sociologist will have a different explanation for it. A geographer will have different explanation, right? Sociologist will talk more about behavioral aspect, more about human nature, more about poverty. But a geographer will talk about the surrounding area, agriculture, agriculture-dominated society. Male chauvinism is far higher. Sex ratio is relatively poor. So ultimately you are talking about geography. When you talk about why this region is agricultural dominated, sorry? So green revolution in Punjab and Haryana, why not in Tamil Nadu and Kerala? So this green revolution, when we are talking about, purely it is agriculture. Green revolution is a very recent phenomena when you go into the historical evolution of society. So that is agri dominated. Agri dominated society will have relatively more patriarchal society, deep rooted patriarchal society. The mind or the attitude of the people will be more conservative, inward looking. And that agriculture society is primarily because the whole area is a plain region, right? And that the moment we talk about plain, pure physical geography. Hope you are getting, right? So in that sense, when we talk about regional approach, or let's say suppose the ecological aspect, when we talk about Compage, it is nothing but regional geography. But when you include the ecological aspect of that region in understanding the man-environment relationship, it becomes Compage. When you use a segment of earth for planning, it becomes space, right? Sequent occupants, that's the same evolution. For example, like you must have heard about ecological succession, right? The species succession, like primary, secondary and all. When you talk about the cultural landscape, in sequential evolution of a cultural landscape, that becomes sequent occupants. Like for example, in our country, what is the sequent occupants? That is economic. I am talking about the sequent occupants in terms of evolution of a society. Yes, we start from Indus Valley civilization. Even before that, there must be some food gatherers, hunters and all, which may not have very well written history about them. So our basic history starts with the Indus Valley civilization. Because we have a lot of evidences about that. Look, just think about the wanderers, food gatherers before that. We don't have historical evidences about that. We don't have written documents about that. So we don't mention that. So thereafter, Indus Valley civilization would have started. After that we have Aryans. Then after that we have Mughals and Turks and all. Then after that we have Britishers. So sequential occupants of an area. Right? Now, man-environment relationship is, if you look at Aryans, why did Aryan came to India?
They found this land suitable for settlement.
Agricultural activities, because at that time agriculture was the most dominant activity of human, right? So thereafter, when they started coming, they would have come first in the deserts of the Central Asia. So obviously when they started migrating, so they would have found the most fertile land from the Mediterranean, between the Mediterranean and India. So the most fertile land would have been the Ganga plain, right? So they came, imagine the people who are coming from Afghanistan and Iran would have found Indus and Ganga like treasures, Getting that? जो आदमी पानी के लिए भटक रहा हो, अचानक उसको पानी का पूरा ये मिल जाए, पूरी नदी की नदी मिल जाए, right? You can understand the religious evolution also. Why Ganga is considered as mother, right? So that sequential occupance, cultural occupancy is somehow related with geography, right? So that all the debate to understand this man and environment relationship is the crux of the part of human geography. Whenever you write an answer, this must be there in your mind. It should not be just reproduction of whatever you have read in the books, because that then you are becoming more academician. You are not supposed to produce a theory here. Rather, you are supposed to apply the theory as a would-be IAS officer, as a thinker, right? As a man who is going to, or woman who are going to apply those knowledge in dealing with the solutions of the problems, to find out the problems. I have told several times, for example, if you are a DM of a Haryana area, right, and coming from outside the plain area, right, how would you perceive Khap Panchayat? As an IAS officer, your perception will be different. As a human right activist, your perception will be different, right? As a law enforcing agency, your perception would be different. This is what you call perspective in geography, the first topic which we are going to deal with. What do you think about Khap Panchayat?